And so, yes, the idea of this bill being that really building that trust between law enforcement and the immigrant communities.
Hello, my name is Ryan Oates. Welcome to the Progressive Massachusetts series about our policy agenda for the 2025-2026 legislative session. I am joined today by Moroni Minter, the political director of the Massachusetts Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Coalition, the MIRA coalition. Moroni, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
We're here to talk about a bill in the Massachusetts State House, the Safe Communities Act. I really appreciate that framing of it because it fundamentally, is a bill that would make people safer. So before we get into the details of it, I want to acknowledge that we are in a period of immigration enforcement that feels very unsafe and very chaotic. So I'm wondering for you, what have the last few weeks been like with the immigrants and refugees that you work with?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me and thank you for that question. I should start by introducing myself and saying, my name is Maloney. I am a political director at MIRA, as you mentioned, Ryan, but I'm also a proud immigrant myself from Gabon, Africa, moved to the US in 2004. And to your question, right now, I think as immigrant, a lot of our communities are facing really this fear, right? Dealing with this fear and anxiety from the reality of deportation, which is happening right now. And so for us, it's been really about how we have a conversation where we are calming folks down, but also really our focus has been around providing resources, and that includes knowing your right training. At the end of the day, regardless of anyone's immigration status, we all have rights. And so we have been focusing heavily on doing training with folks so they understand what their rights are and when and how to exercise those rights when necessary.
Yeah, I think like community and also the kind of resources and advocacy that you guys are providing is like just so critical right now. So thank you for the work you're doing. There's another piece of context that I want to give before speaking about the bill, which is that, in the US, we have a long history of due process where if someone is accused of a crime or breaking the law, the government has to take certain procedures before depriving that person of their liberty or property. President Trump recently signed the Laken Riley Act. As you understand it, I'm wondering, how has that law affected undocumented people's rights to due process?
Yeah, it's that's been a hard one to swallow, right? As you mentioned, the Lake and Raleigh Act that was signed into law by the president on January 29th, it has a significant implication for the due process, as you mentioned, right? The due process rights of undocumented individuals. And so what we understand is what this law would do is basically it expands mandatory detention to include certain undocumented people who have been charged, arrested, or convicted of theft offenses, including shoplifting. And in short summary, the law, as I mentioned, significantly impacts the due process rights of undocumented individuals by really enforcing mandatory detention without the possibility of a bond or hearings, thereby challenging the central principles of the justice fairness.
And just to make sure I understand, so if a person is arrested or accused of a crime, they could be detained, not necessarily after they've been convicted. Is that the case?
That's right.
So, given that immigrants' rights and safety are at stake, I want to talk about the Safe Communities Act. So, its official name is an act to protect the civil rights and safety of all Massachusetts residents. The primary sponsors in the Senate are Senators Jamie Eldridge and Liz Miranda. The primary sponsors in the House are Representatives Manny Cruz and Priscilla Sousa. So, I guess in short, what is the Safe Communities Act and how will it help to protect immigrants' rights?
Thank you. That's a good question. And thank you for also naming the sponsors of the bill. We're really appreciative and grateful to our champion of the bill. So thank you for mentioning their names. what the Safe Communities Act really is, it's an essential legislation that will provide immigrants with a fair and just legal representation system in Massachusetts. What the bill does is really has four key provisions in the bill, and the first key provision is it protects immigrants from unwarranted immigration inquiries. We know that no one should fear being questioned about their immigration status when seeking justice or protection. And so the Safe Communities Act, it prohibits police and court officials from inquiring about someone's immigration status, which ensures that immigrants, whether they are workers, tenants, or survivors of domestic violence, can report crime and seek help without fear of deportation. So that's the first provision of the bill. And the second bill is really it safeguards the right during ICE interrogation, right? So we know that ICE often targets people in our jails and correctional facilities, including those who have not even been convicted of any crime. And so the Safe Communities Act would require that local law enforcement obtain a written informed consent before any ICE questioning of someone in their custody. And what this does is really it will ensure that immigrants know that they have the right to refuse such interviews or have a lawyer present, right? And this also would also prevent them from unknowingly signing away their rights or facilitating their own deportation in some cases. And the third provision is really it gives access to justice in court. The bill prohibits public safety officials from initiating contact with ICE about someone's pending release from police or court custody. This is a fundamental protection that ensures justice for both, again, victims and defendant in our judicial system. And then the fourth and last provision is really the bill calls to end the costly, harmful of a 287G agreement. So local law enforcement should not serve as federal immigration agents. And so in this provision, the bill will prohibit 287G contract, which we not deputize local correctional personnel to engage in deportation activities at taxpayers' expense, right? And so these agreement, as we know, undermine trust between immigrant and communities and law enforcement and the vast, really a waste of state resources in general. So that's really what the Safe Community does. Those are all the four provisions that this bill will cover. And this is something we've been working on for quite some time. And so we're giving it another shot and hopefully we'll make some progress this legislative session.
It sounds like what you're saying here about this bill is that it will allow people to access local law enforcement to get help, right? Without being afraid that suddenly the local police will then start acting as law enforcement, as immigration enforcement. Is that kind of one of the core tenets?
Correct. Right now, we know that folks who may be undocumented who are victim of crime, knowing that they might be questioned about their immigration status, which could lead to them being deported, rather suffer and deal with the consequences of this crime on their own. And so what this does is really, if you know that you will not be questioned by law enforcement when you're reporting a crime because of your status, then you will be more likely to actually approach law enforcement and reporting something that's been done to you. And so, yes, the idea of this bill being that really building that trust between law enforcement and the immigrant communities. So yes, correct.
So given that all the benefits of this bill, if people want to support this bill, what can folks do?
Yeah, I think for those who really care about immigrants, really want to protect immigrant community, want to see this bill pass, the way for you to get to help right now is by staying engaged throughout the legislative session. Your legislators need to hear from you, so we need you to contact your state representative, your senators, and urge them to endorse and support this bill. Because at the end of the day, we as advocates can only do so much. But it makes a huge difference when legislators are actually hearing directly from their constituents as well as those who are mostly impacted. So please, to get involved, contact your legislator and stay engaged throughout the session. That's one way.
Great. And then if folks beyond that want to keep up with the campaign, how can they hear more about what's going on with this campaign?
Yeah, so if people want to get involved with the campaign, protecting our immigrant community campaign, people should go to our website at miracoalition.org and sign the petition. There is a petition to join protecting our immigrant communities campaign. So once you sign that petition, the petition actually has, if you want to volunteer, if you want to help us, the petition gives you many items of action steps that you can take. And then you get to check off what action you want to take specifically. And our team will follow up with you when we need people to take those actions. It's also a way for you to stay engaged, for us to inform you on how this campaign is going and how the bills are moving at the State House. There are also, if you want to be involved in the campaign directly, we are asking people to join the campaign coalition. I will share my contact information. You can reach out to me directly if you want to be on the coalition. And lastly, I just want to share that another way for you to stay engaged and show support is we have our advocacy day coming, Immigrant Day at the State House, IDISH for short, and that's March 19th. This is a great opportunity for all of us to come together, immigrant or non-immigrant, to come together to celebrate the contributions that immigrants make in Massachusetts and beyond. But also, as I say, it's Advocacy Day, right? It's an opportunity to talk directly with legislators about these bills that I mentioned and call on them to support these legislation. So these are ways for you to get engaged with MIRA.
Thank you so much for sharing so many different ways that people can get involved. I think both of these bills will be huge for helping immigrants to have access to legal representation as well as access to justice when they need it. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. We'll be sure to get our members connected with all of those links that you mentioned. So Maroni, I want to thank you for sitting down to talk with me today.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you for Progressive Mass for doing this. Yeah, let's stay connected, let's stay collaborated, and move forward together. Thank you.
Thanks so much.